holding something tonight. Not in your hands necessarily, though there may be something there too if you go and look somewhere further in. There is a thing you have been carrying through the evening, and it came to bed with you, and it is the reason you are awake at this hour listening to a voice instead of being asleep. It might be a worry of the ordinary kind, about money or work or somebody's health. It might be a person and something that is or is not going on between you and them. It might be a version of how this year was supposed to go that has not turned out to be available. And here is the thing I want to say before anything else, because it is the whole of tonight, and it is not what people expect from a subject like this one. Nobody is going to ask you to put it down. That is the usual instruction, and it is the reason that most people give up on this particular teaching within about 4 minutes of encountering it. Let go, release it, stop holding on. All of which sounds admirable, and none of which anybody has ever actually managed to do by deciding to at 1 a.m, in a bed. What we are going to look at instead is much smaller, and it is entirely available tonight. Not whether you are holding something, which is nobody's business but yours. How you are holding it, because there is a genuine difference between holding a thing and gripping it. It is not a word game, and it is not a reframe. It is two different physical actions with two entirely different results. Almost nobody has ever had it pointed out to them. And once you have felt the difference in your own hand on an ordinary evening, you cannot unfeel it again. Before we go on, settle in properly. There is nowhere to be until morning, and nothing here to achieve. If you would like, feel free to share what time it is where you are and what the weather is doing outside your window tonight. And if you would like to carry these quiet hours into other evenings, this channel is also on Spotify, and the link is waiting in the description below for whenever you want it, which does not have to be tonight. You do not need any background in Buddhism to be here. You do not need to concentrate or remember anything or arrive anywhere by the end. There will be old teachings and slow stories and long stretches where very little happens, and none of it is a test. If your attention wanders off in the middle of a sentence and comes back 3 chapters later, that is not a failure. That is the sound of a person falling asleep, which is exactly what this is for. So let the body arrive. Let your weight be handed over completely to whatever is holding you. The mattress, the pillow, the blanket over your legs. Let the shoulders come down away from the ears. Let the jaw loosen. Let the hands rest wherever they have fallen. Take 1 slow breath in and let it go out again without managing the way it leaves. And let us begin in a small room above a shop on a Tuesday evening with a violin. She is 43 years old, and she has wanted to do this since she was 9, and the wanting has been sitting there quietly for 34 years in the way that these things do when nobody disturbs them. There was no violin in the house when she was a child. There was not the money for one, and there was not the room for the noise of one, and it was never anybody's fault, and she has never once held it against anybody. She asked twice, and then she stopped asking, which is what children do when they work out the answer. So now she's 43, and her own children are old enough not to need her every evening of the week, and she has bought a violin from a shop in the next town for a sum of money that she has not told her husband and does not intend to. And she is sitting in a small room above that shop for the first of 36 lessons. The teacher is a woman of about 60. She's been doing this in the same room for a very long time, and she has seen, by her own rough estimate, something in the region of 400 adult beginners come up those stairs. She says they are all the same, and she says it fondly. They spend the first 20 minutes on the left hand and the neck of the instrument, and where the fingers go, which is straightforward and countable and rather pleasant. She is good at it. She has always been good at the sort of thing you can be told once. And then, about halfway through, they get to the bow. She picks it up the way that any human being who has never been shown otherwise picks up a stick. Whole hand round it, thumb straight across the other side, knuckles white within about 4 seconds, because she is nervous and because she wants very badly indeed to do this properly, and because 34 years of wanting something is sitting on her shoulders in that little room and has to go somewhere. She puts it on the string at roughly the right place and pulls, and the sound that comes out is horrifying. It is not, by any description anybody would accept, a violin sound. It is a scraping, crushing, sideways noise, and it wobbles, and it stops halfway through because the bow has gone somewhere she did not send it. She said afterward that it was, without much competition, the single most disappointing moment of her adult life, and that she very nearly did not go back the following week. The teacher did not say anything about it for a moment. Then she said, quite gently, "May I take your hand a moment?" And she took the hand, and she peeled the fingers off the bow one at a time, which takes longer than you would think because they do not want to come. And she set the bow back into that hand in the correct way, which involves a bent thumb, and the fingers draped rather than wrapped, and a good deal less of absolutely everything. And then she said the sentence she has said to something like 400 people in that room over 30 years. It has to sit in your hand, not be held by it. The woman said that this made absolutely no sense to her whatsoever, and said so out loud. So the teacher did the thing she does at that point, which is the reason this story is worth telling at 1 in the morning. She said, "Hold it as loosely as you possibly can, not comfortably loosely, loosely enough that you are convinced it is about to fall out of your hand and onto the floor of somebody else's studio, loosely enough that it is genuinely a bit frightening. And then, from there, draw the bow, and then draw." And she did it, entirely certain that the bow was going to end up on the floor and that she was going to have to apologize. And the bow did not go anywhere near the floor, and the sound that came out of that instrument was a real note, not a good note, a wobbly, thin beginner's note, entirely recognizable as a violin, produced by a woman of 43 who had never made one before. She said she started crying, which she had not expected at all, and was rather embarrassed about afterward, and which she did not explain. And the teacher carried straight on and said something about the next exercise, and did not look at her, and did not make anything of it whatsoever, because she has seen that 400 times as well. She went back the following week and the week after, and she is still going 3 years later. She says the hand was the whole of the first year, not the notes and not the reading, which came along in the ordinary way. The hand. She said she would catch herself in the middle of a piece with a white-knuckled fist round that bow, and no idea when it had happened, usually in a difficult bar, usually the bar she most wanted to get right. She said the teacher never once told her off about it. She would simply walk over and say the same 4 words she says to everybody and wait. Let me see it. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is the mechanism in that story, and it is not a metaphor. It is physics, and it is the reason this whole evening is going to be about hands. A tight grip on a bow does 3 separate things to it, and every single one of them is fatal to the sound. It kills the weight. A relaxed arm has weight in it, real weight, and that weight travels down through the bow and into the string, and that is what actually produces a note. A gripping arm is busy holding itself up. The weight goes into the fist instead of into the instrument, and what reaches the string is a person pressing rather than a person's arm resting. It kills the responsiveness. A bow is not carried across a string in a straight line by an unmoving hand. It moves constantly in tiny amounts, hundreds of adjustments a minute that nobody makes deliberately, and that a good player could not describe if you asked. A fist cannot do any of that. A fist has exactly one setting, which is fist, and it kills the contact, which sounds like the opposite of what a firm grip should do. But a rigid connection transmits everything. Every tremor in the arm, every bit of tension in the shoulder, every nervous shake of a woman doing something she has wanted for 34 years goes straight down into the string with nothing to absorb it. So the bow bounces and chatters and skids. Every single thing she wanted from that instrument was on the other side of holding it less. And that is the whole of tonight in one paragraph. And it applies to a very great deal more than a violin. Because look at what she was actually doing in that room. And be kind about it while you look, because it is what every single person does. She was not gripping that bow because she did not care about it. She was gripping it because she cared more about it than about almost anything she had done that decade. 34 years of wanting was in that hand. Her mother and the money and the room that was too small, and the 2 times she asked and stopped asking, all of it, in a hand holding a stick of wood on a Tuesday evening above a shop. The grip was made out of the caring, and it was the caring, routed the wrong way, that was ruining the sound. That is the thing to have in mind for the rest of the evening, and it is why the usual version of this teaching does not work. Grip is not the same as holding, and it is not the same as love. Holding is what you do with something you have. It is ordinary, and it goes on all day, and there is nothing the matter with any of it. You hold a cup, a hand, a job, a plan for Saturday. Grip is what happens to holding when fear gets into it. Fear of dropping it, fear of losing it, fear of not doing it properly, or not deserving it, or having it taken away by somebody who was always going to take it away. And the fear is very, nearly always a sign that the thing genuinely matters to you, which is precisely why gripping feels virtuous, and why people defend it when it is pointed out, and why let go lands like an accusation. So nobody is going to ask you tonight to care less about anything or anybody. We are going to look slowly and from a number of different angles across the next 3 hours at what the grip itself is costing you, not what the holding is costing. The grip, and we will find, I think, that it is costing you the very thing you are most afraid of losing. That is the pattern in every story tonight, and it was the pattern in that room above the shop. The sound she had wanted since she was 9 years old was on the other side of caring slightly less about producing it. Let us rest here for a while. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy, and go and find your hands wherever they are on the blanket. Have a look at what they are doing. For a great many of the people listening to this, the fingers will be curled, not into a fist, nothing so dramatic, just curled slightly, around nothing whatsoever, the way they have been since about 9 o'clock this evening. Let them open, let the palms go soft, and the fingers lie long, and the whole hand rest there on the blanket, holding absolutely nothing at all. It is a very small thing, and it is not symbolic, and I am not asking you to make anything of it. Something in the body knows this posture very well, and something in the mind follows it rather more often than anybody would expect. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. Nothing needs to be held in this room tonight. Not the day, not the week, not any of it. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because before we can talk about opening a hand, we have to look honestly at why they close and at what happens when somebody tries to force one open. There is a child of about 4 with her hand stuck through a set of park railings, and about 9 adults standing round her, and every single one of them is making it worse. Let us go and see how she actually gets free. The railings are the old cast iron sort, painted black about 11 times over, so that the edges of everything have gone soft, with a little curl at the top of each one, and a gap between them of something like 4.5 inches. They have been there since before anybody's grandmother, and they will be there long after all of this. It is a Saturday afternoon in a park in the middle of an ordinary town. It is not particularly warm, and it is not raining, and there are the usual number of people about doing the usual things. She is 4 years old. She had gone over to look at a duck. That is the whole of the cause. There is nothing else in it, and there never was. The duck was on the other side of the railings, down on the bank, doing absolutely nothing of any interest to anybody in the world, except a 4-year-old. She had put her arm through the gap to point at it, and then a little further through to reach towards it, in the way that children do when pointing has not achieved the result they were after. And now her arm is through those railings up to somewhere past the elbow, and it will not come back, and she is screaming, not hurt. That is worth establishing early, because it changes how you hear the rest of it. She's not injured in any way. There is no blood. Nothing is trapped hard enough to mark her, and nothing will be sore in the morning. But she is 4 years old, and she is stuck, and being stuck at 4 is an emergency of a kind that adults have entirely and completely forgotten about. There is no arguing with it and no explaining it away. From the inside it is total. Her father gets there first, from about 40 yards away, and does exactly what any father in the world does, which is take hold of her shoulders and pull, which does not work, and which hurts her shoulder, and which makes her scream a good deal more than she was screaming before. Then her mother arrives and does something marginally more intelligent, which is to try to turn the arm and bring it back at a different angle, which does not work either, because the arm is no longer the size it was 2 minutes ago, and no angle exists that will help. And here is the thing that everybody standing there was too busy to notice, and that turns out to be the entire situation. The arm went through perfectly easily. It went through in about a second, without any effort at all, and without her thinking about it, because a 4-year-old's arm is a good deal narrower than 4.5 inches, and always was and still is. Nothing about the arm has changed. Nothing about the railings has changed. What is stuck is not the arm at all. What is stuck is a fist. She's made a fist. Because she is frightened. And because when a small child is frightened, the hand closes. And it closes whether or not there is anything in it. And a closed hand at the end of a straight arm is wider, by rather more than an inch, than the gap that the open hand went through without touching the sides. She cannot come back out through that gap because she is holding on to nothing at all, extremely hard, and has been doing so continuously for about 4 minutes. There is nothing in that hand. There has never been anything in that hand. The duck is on the bank and was never within 18 inches of her. By this point, there are 9 or 10 people standing round in a loose ring, which is what happens. Somebody has suggested butter, and somebody has been sent to see whether the cafe has any. Somebody else has said something about ringing the fire brigade at normal volume, about 18 inches from a 4-year-old's head, which does not improve the situation in any way at all. And the father is down on his knees getting steadily more frightened, and every bit of that is going straight down his arms and into his daughter's shoulders, and she can feel all of it, and it is making the fist tighter by the second. And then a woman kneels down on the other side of the railings. She is somebody's grandmother, out for a walk on a Saturday, and she has no particular expertise in children or in anything else, and would say so. She simply walks round and goes down onto her knees on the bankside, where the duck had been, so that she is on the far side of the fence at exactly the child's eye level. She does not touch the arm at all. She does not mention it, or the railings, or the crowd, or any of it. She does not touch the child at all, and does not look at the arm. She says, "Did you see where he went? He went right under the bridge, didn't he? I think he's got a nest down there." And the child, who is 4 years old, and who has been screaming for 4 solid minutes about a fist she does not know she is making, stops screaming and looks at the bridge. And somewhere out at the end of that arm, her hand opens, not because anybody told her to, not because anybody was even looking at it, because a hand that is not frightened does not stay closed, and because she had stopped being frightened for about 6 seconds, and because 6 seconds is all it takes. Her mother, who was standing right there watching all of it, said afterward that the arm came out entirely on its own, that nobody pulled, that nobody was even holding her by then, that it simply slid back through the gap the way it had gone in 4 minutes earlier, and the whole thing was over. And within about 20 seconds, the child was a great deal more interested in the bridge and the nest than in anything that had happened to her. The woman on the bank went on her walk. Nobody thanked her properly, because by the time anybody thought to, she had gone. The child is in her 20s now, and does not remember any of it, which is how these things generally go. Her mother remembers all of it, in detail, including what everybody said and the exact tone of the man who mentioned the fire brigade. And what her mother says about it, 30 years on, is that she has never forgotten how completely useless every single thing they did was, and how the whole business was solved by somebody talking about a duck. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets and the breath moving quietly in and out. That story contains 2 things that we are going to use for the rest of the night, and I want to set them both out as plainly as I can before we go any further. The first of them is what a grip is actually made of, which almost nobody has right. It is not made of wanting. That is the assumption everybody makes, and it is wrong. It is made of fear. Look at the sequence of it, because the sequence is the whole argument. She was not gripping anything when she reached for that duck. She wanted the duck enormously, and the hand was completely open, and the arm went through those railings in about a second, without effort and without incident. The fist did not arrive with the wanting. It arrived at the exact moment she discovered she could not get back out again, and it arrived by itself. She did not decide to make a fist. Nobody has ever decided to make that fist. It is an automatic response to being frightened, installed long before she was born, running without consulting her. And that, I think, is the honest description of what is going on in you tonight. Whatever it happens to be that you are holding, you are not gripping because you are greedy, or materialistic, or attached, or spiritually underdeveloped, or any of the other things that get said about people on this subject, usually by people who are not lying awake. You are gripping because at some point, possibly quite recently, and possibly a very long time ago, you became frightened of losing something, and a hand that is frightened closes. That is all that has happened. That is not a fault in your character. It is a reflex that has been in your species for a very long time, and it is in every infant on the day they are born, and it has saved a great many people from falling out of a great many things. It is simply, at 1 o'clock in the morning, in a warm bed, in a dark room, holding nothing whatsoever, entirely and completely unnecessary. And the second thing, which is the more practical of the two, you cannot open a hand by pulling on the arm. Everybody in that park tried it, and every single one of them failed. The father pulled. The mother twisted the arm. Somebody suggested butter, and somebody else said something about the fire brigade out loud in front of a 4-year-old. Every one of those interventions was applied to the wrong end of the problem, and every one of them made the fist tighter for the same reason. Being pulled at by frightened adults is frightening, and fear is the only thing holding that hand shut. The harder they worked, the worse it got. That is not bad luck. That is the mechanism running exactly as designed, and that is precisely, exactly in detail, what people do to themselves at this hour of the night. Let it go. Stop thinking about it. Just release it. Put it down. Why can you not put it down? That is a person standing at the wrong end of their own arm, pulling, and then discovering that it does not work, and becoming more frightened because it does not work, and gripping harder as a direct result of the effort to stop gripping, which is why the second hour of a bad night is worse than the first. Not because the problem grew, because you have spent an hour pulling on your own arm and frightening yourself with the failure. You cannot make yourself let go. It is not a weakness in you. Nobody in the entire history of the world has ever successfully instructed themselves to relax, and everybody has tried, and it has never once worked for anybody. What actually worked was a woman with no expertise in anything kneeling down on the wrong side of a fence and talking about a duck. And not because it was clever. She was not being clever and would have been embarrassed to be told she was. It worked because it changed the only variable in that entire situation that could be changed, which was whether or not the child was frightened. Everything else was fixed. The railings were fixed, the gap was fixed, the arm was the size it was. Change the fear and the hand does the rest on its own. Nobody opened that hand. That is the sentence to keep. It simply stopped being closed, and then there was nothing holding anybody anywhere. So here is the whole method for tonight, and it is a good deal smaller than it sounds. We are not going to work on the grip at all. We are going to leave the grip entirely alone. We are going to work on the conditions and let the hand look after itself in the way that it has always been perfectly capable of doing when nobody is interfering with it. Which is why nothing in the next 3 hours is going to ask you to release anything at all. It is going to do something slower and considerably more likely to work, which is to spend the night making the grip unnecessary rather than forbidden. Warm room, dark, nothing arriving, nobody assessing you, a voice going on about hawks and violins, and a hand that is not frightened does not stay closed. Let us do a first small version of that now, and it really is very small, and nothing depends on it. Find your hands again on the blanket. Do not open them deliberately. Do not correct anything. That is pulling on the arm, and it is the one thing we know does not work. Just notice what they are doing. Notice, without changing any of it, whether there is any curl in the fingers at all. Notice where the thumbs are. Notice whether the hands are doing anything more than simply lying there on the blanket, and then simply let them be warm. That is the whole instruction. That is all. Feel the temperature of them. Feel the weight of them lying there. Feel the blanket underneath and where the air touches the backs of them. Very often, if you leave a hand entirely alone and simply attend to how warm it happens to be, it will open by itself within about 30 seconds, without any instruction whatsoever, in exactly the way the child's hand did on that Saturday afternoon. You will not catch it happening. Nobody ever does. You will simply notice at some point that it is open, and if it does not open, that is entirely fine, and it is not a failure of any kind, and nothing in the next 3 hours depends on it having happened. We have all night. There is no hurry anywhere in this. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. Nothing is stuck. Nothing in this room has ever been stuck. When you are ready, we will go on together, because there is an objection to all of this, and it needs answering early rather than late, and it is the reason a great many people hear the words non-attachment and quite reasonably want nothing to do with it. If I hold everything loosely, do I not stop caring? There is a man on a hillside in Northumberland with a hawk on his fist, and the straps are loose, and she could go at any moment. Let us go and stand next to him and watch what happens. The bird is a Harris's hawk. Her name is Bramble, and she is 7 years old, which is a comfortable middle age for a bird like that, and a long way from the end of anything. He has had her since she was 11 weeks old. It is a Tuesday afternoon in February, on a hillside in Northumberland with not a great deal on it. The light is going in about 40 minutes, and they both know it, and they are working the edge of a wood up and along and back, the way they do 2 or 3 times a week, between the beginning of October and the end of March. And here is the thing that everybody who has not done this gets wrong, every single time, without exception. She is not tied on to anything. There is a pair of jesses on her legs, which are the little leather straps that go round above the foot, and those run down to a swivel, and the swivel to a leash, and the leash is looped through the fingers of his glove. That is the arrangement in the car park and in the mews at home, and any time there are people or dogs or roads about. But out here, on the open hill, working, the leash comes off entirely and goes in his pocket. She sits on his fist with the jesses hanging loose, and she flies whenever she decides to whatever tree she likes the look of, sometimes only 20 yards, sometimes 100 yards off across the field, sometimes further than that, sometimes out of sight entirely for 2 or 3 minutes, which is a long time when you are standing in a field, and there is not one single thing in the world stopping her from lifting off that glove, going over the top of that ridge, and never being seen by him or by anybody else again for the rest of her life. He said the first time you do it, your stomach drops out of you. He said everybody's does, and anybody who says otherwise is not telling the truth. That there is a moment in the first season, standing in a field, when you unclip the leash from a bird you have spent 11 months and several hundred hours on, and the whole of you says, very clearly, "What on earth am I doing?" And she comes back, every time, for 7 years. Not because she is tame. He is very clear about this and slightly impatient about having to explain it, because people always want the other answer. She is not a pet. She is not affectionate. She does not come to be stroked and would not enjoy it. And she does not love him in any sense that a person who owns a spaniel would recognize or accept. She comes back because the arrangement genuinely works for her, because a hawk hunting a hedgerow with a man walking it out ahead of her eats a great deal more reliably than a hawk doing the same hedgerow alone, because in 7 winters he has never once failed to feed her, and because 7 years of that has made his glove, quite simply, the best place in that entire landscape for a bird like her to be standing. He said, she stays because she is free to go. That is the only reason any of it works, and it is the whole of the sport. And then he said the other thing, which he said while looking at the wood rather than at me, and which is the actual reason this chapter exists at all. He said the birds that get lost are almost never the loose ones. They belong to the people who cannot stand the uncertainty of it. The ones who keep a bird too heavy because a hungry hawk frightens them, and a heavy hawk does not need anybody. The ones who fly on a creance, which is a long training line, for months longer than they should, because they cannot bring themselves to take it off and find out. The ones who grab, the ones who chase a bird that has sat down in a tree, walking underneath it, calling, getting louder, which teaches a hawk over about 3 afternoons that the man on the ground is a thing to be got away from. Every one of those is done out of the fear of losing the bird, and every single one of them is the thing that loses the bird in the end. He said the single fastest way to lose a hawk is to be frightened of losing her, because every last thing you do out of that fear is the thing that pushes her off the glove. There is no exception to it that he has ever seen in 30 years, in himself or in anybody else. He lost a bird once, years and years before Bramble, in his 2nd season. He talks about it in a flat sort of way that suggests he has told it before and does not much enjoy it. A young male, well flown and going nicely, out on a windy March afternoon that he should not have gone out on at all, and knew it at the time. The bird went up on a thermal and kept going and did not come back, and he stood in that field until it was properly dark, and then drove around the lanes for 2 days with a bit of meat and a whistle, and never saw him again. And what he says about it is not what you expect either. He does not say that he held on to that bird too tight. He says he was in a hurry and the weather was wrong and he wanted to fly because he had driven 40 minutes to get there. He said the loose hand is not a guarantee of anything at all, and he would not want anybody thinking it was. It is simply the only arrangement in which the bird has any reason whatsoever to stay. Come back now gently to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets, and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is the objection I promised to answer, and I want to do it properly, because if it isn't answered, then the rest of tonight is worth very little. The objection goes like this. If I hold everything loosely, do I not simply stop caring? Is this not just a way of talking myself into indifference and calling it wisdom? It is a good objection. It is the right objection. And a great many people have quite reasonably walked from this entire teaching on the strength of it. And the answer, which I would like to be as plain and as unhedged about as I can manage, is no. It is the reverse of that. It is exactly and precisely the reverse. Attachment is not love. It is very often what happens to love when it gets frightened. Look at what attachment actually does. In practice, in an ordinary life, in a house on a Wednesday, not the philosophical version of it. The version you can watch happening in a kitchen, in somebody you know, or in yourself if you are honest at 1 in the morning, which is easier than being honest at noon. It monitors. That is the first and most reliable sign of it. It checks continually whether the other person is all right with you. It reads tone in messages where there is no tone. It notices the gap between what you sent and what came back. It rehearses conversations that may never happen and improves them and rehearses them again. It needs a particular response before it can settle. And when it does not get that response, it does not settle. And it does not stop asking. And it will keep a person awake for a whole night over 11 words. None of that is love doing any of that work. Love does not need to check, and never has, and would not know where to begin. That is fear wearing love's coat. And everybody can tell the difference from the outside, including, unfortunately, the person it is aimed at, who can feel the monitoring even when nothing is said. And love without the grip in it looks and feels entirely different. And almost everybody has met it once or twice in their lives, usually in somebody older, and remembers it for the rest of their lives afterward. It does not require anything at all back in order to go on being exactly what it is. It is not conditional on having been reciprocated correctly this particular week, or answered promptly, or noticed. It does not go and check. You can be away from a person like that for 11 months and come back and find it exactly where you left it, without a single word having been exchanged in between, because it was never being maintained by the exchanging. A person who loves you like that is extraordinarily restful to be near, and you cannot always say why. A person who is attached to you is exhausting to be near, and you also cannot always say why, and you very often feel guilty about finding it so, and both of them would tell you, sincerely, that they love you, and both of them would be telling the truth as far as they understood it. Now, this tradition has been saying something along these lines for about 2,500 years, and it is worth being careful with the words, because they have been handed on in English in a way that has done a certain amount of damage. The teaching does not say, and has never said, do not love people. What it says is that grasping is the thing that produces suffering. Grasping, not loving, not caring, not being bound to people, the clutch, the closing of the hand, the demand that a thing stay exactly as it is indefinitely because you cannot bear the alternative and have not agreed to it, and the observation underneath it is not moral at all. It is nearer to a piece of engineering that a thing held in a closed hand is being held against its own nature, because everything moves, and the holding will therefore cost you continuously and forever, and will fail in the end regardless. And there is a whole positive half of it that gets left out of almost every popular account, which is worth saying plainly because its absence has misled a great many people. This tradition is enormously, almost tiresomely interested in loving kindness, in compassion, in wishing people well, including people you do not like, including people who have wronged you. It spends a very great deal of its time on this and always has. Those are not the consolation prize handed out to people who have successfully given up their attachments. They are not a lesser substitute for the warmth you were told to abandon. They are what is underneath the attachment. They are what is left and what becomes available once the grip comes off the top of it. The hawk on that hillside is not less loved because the leash is off. She is fed better, flown better, watched a great deal more closely, and understood far more thoroughly than any bird kept permanently on a line, by a man who has quietly organized a considerable part of his own life around her for 7 years. He simply does not own her, and has arranged things so that he does not have to. And that brings us to the practical version of all this, which is the only part of the chapter worth carrying into the rest of the night. Ask about whatever it is you are holding tonight. Is this hold about them or about my fear? That is a genuinely useful question, and the striking thing about it is that it is answerable. Usually within about 4 seconds, honestly, without much difficulty. It does not require any spiritual attainment whatsoever to ask, and you do not have to do anything at all with the answer. The checking of the phone at midnight, the rereading of a message you have already read 4 times, the rehearsing of what you will say to them on Thursday, the going over and over of what exactly they meant by that particular sentence on Sunday. None of that is love, not 1 second of it. All of it is fear, and all of it is happening entirely on your side of the fence, where they cannot see it and are not affected by it, and would in most cases be baffled by it. It is costing you a night's sleep, and it is producing precisely nothing for the person it is supposedly about, who is asleep. Meanwhile, the actual love, the ordinary, daily, unglamorous version of it, sits underneath the whole business perfectly intact. It always has. It is not in any danger whatsoever from tonight, or from this chapter, or from anything that happens in a dark room between now and the morning. We are not putting that down tonight. We are never putting that down at any point, in any chapter. That was never once what any of this was about, in this tradition or in any other, whatever gets said about it by people who have read 1 page. Let us rest here for a while. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands lie open on the blanket, holding nothing at all. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. Nobody's going anywhere tonight because you stopped gripping them for a few hours in a dark room while you were asleep. That is not how any of it works. It has never been how any of it works. The people who love you will still love you at 7 o'clock in the morning, having been entirely unaware of the whole thing. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because grip does not only attach itself to people and objects, it attaches to something much less visible, and this one keeps people awake for years without ever being identified. There is a man of 64 standing in a school car park at 8:15 in the morning, 3 months after he retired, and he is not entirely sure why he is there. Let us go and stand in the car park with him. The car park is round the back of the building, past the bins and the delivery bay, with the white lines mostly worn off, and a broken bollard at one end that has been broken for about 9 years. His space was the second one along, nearest the door. It never had his name painted on it. It never needed his name painted on it in 26 years, and everybody knew, and nobody ever parked there. He was head of that school for 19 years, and at that school altogether for 26. He retired at the end of the summer term. There was a very good party, and a decanter that he did not want and has not used, and a speech from the chair of governors that made him cry in front of about 400 people, which he had absolutely not expected to do and has thought about since. And it is now the middle of a wet October, and it is 12 minutes past 8 on a Thursday morning, and he is sitting in his car in the second space along. He does not entirely know why he is there. He would tell you, if you asked him directly, that he was passing. And he was passing, in a sense. He had gone out for a paper, which is true, and he had taken a particular route to get there, which is also true. That route is a 15-minute detour, and he has now taken it on 11 separate mornings since the beginning of September, which is a number he knows exactly and has never said out loud to anybody. He does not go in. That should be said clearly, because it changes the whole picture. He is not a man making a nuisance of himself. He has not been in the building since July, and everybody would be perfectly pleasant to him if he did go in, and would find him a coffee, and would be genuinely glad to see him for about 8 minutes, which is somehow the worst part of it, and he knows it, and that is precisely why he stays in the car. He sits in the car and watches the front of the building for the 20 minutes between about 10 past 8 and 8:30. He can tell you exactly what he sees from there. He is very precise about it, in the way that people are precise about things they have looked at a good deal more often than they intended to. The minibus comes in at 14 minutes past, which is a full 4 minutes later than it used to come in, and he has views about that which he has expressed to nobody. The new head has changed where the staff park, which he thinks is a mistake for reasons involving the delivery bay, and which he has thought about a genuinely surprising amount for a man who does not work there. And there is a leak in the guttering above the main door that has been there since March. He can see the stain on the brickwork quite clearly from where he parks. He knows exactly who he would have rung about it. He knows roughly what it would have cost and which budget it would have come out of and what they would have said about it. And that, in the end, is the thing that keeps him sitting in that car for 20 minutes at a time on 11 mornings. It is not affection, particularly. He would like it to be affection, and it is not. It is something considerably more uncomfortable than affection. It is that he still knows all of it. Every bit of it is still in him. 19 years of who does what and which supplier is reliable and which parent will ring and what the boiler does in October. Entirely intact, extremely detailed, instantly available, and completely, permanently useless. There is nowhere for any of it to go, and nobody to give it to, and it does not fade simply because it has stopped being needed. That is the thing sitting in the car with him. He said, much later, and to somebody who was not family, that the strangest part of the whole business was that he had genuinely been looking forward to retiring. He had meant it. He had planned for it properly, over about 3 years. He was not one of those men who dreads it and jokes about dreading it, and then goes to pieces in the September. He had a list. There was a boat involved, and a brother in Canada, and a shed that needed doing. And he could not get to a single item on that list, because some part of him was still turning up at 8:10 in the morning and reporting for duty at a job that had ceased to exist in July. And a man cannot be in 2 places at once, and that part of him was not available for boats. He stopped in the February, not because anybody said anything, and not because of any particular insight. It stopped the way these things generally stop, which is that one morning he did not go, because the man was coming about the boiler, and then he did not go the next week either, and by March he noticed that he had not been for a month. He said the odd thing was that he did not miss it, and that the leak in the guttering got fixed at some point that spring by somebody without his involvement, and he only knows that because he happened to drive past on the way somewhere else. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets, and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is why that story is in the middle of a night about hands. Grip does not only attach itself to objects, or even to people. Those are the obvious too, and they are the ones everybody thinks of, and they are not the ones that keep a person awake for years on end. It attaches to who you have been, and that grip is very nearly invisible, for a reason worth understanding. It does not feel like holding anything at all. There is no object in it. There is nothing you could put down on a table. It feels like being somebody. It feels like simply continuing to be the person you have been for 19 years, which is not an activity that anybody would think to examine, any more than you would examine breathing. Nobody has ever said to themselves, I am currently gripping an identity. But look at what that man was actually doing in that car park at 12 minutes past 8 on a Thursday in October. He was holding a role that had already ended, and notice that nobody was taking it from him. That is what makes it different from every other kind of loss. There was no dispute, no rival, no injustice, nothing to appeal against. It had simply gone. It went in July, cleanly, on a stated date, with a party and a decanter and a great deal of goodwill. There was nothing to fight over. Nobody was fighting him. There was no other side. The only place in the world where that job still existed at all was in a man's hands, in a car, in the second space along, at 12 minutes past 8 on a Thursday morning in October. And this is a very great deal more common than the retirement version of it, which is simply the most visible one because it has a date attached and a party. It is going on everywhere, in people of every age, in enormous numbers, and almost none of them have identified it as anything at all. The mother whose children have grown up and moved out, still holding the version of herself that was genuinely needed at 6 o'clock every single evening for 18 years, and who cannot work out what 6 o'clock is for now. The man who was always the fit one, at 48, still holding a description of a body that was accurate at 30, and is not accurate now, and who is quietly angry about it in a way he would not be able to explain. The person who was the difficult one in a family of 4 children, still playing that part at Christmas at the age of 59, in a room where every single individual has changed enormously, and the arrangement between them has not moved an inch since 1978. Anybody who was very good at something at 25 and has quietly organized their sense of themselves around it ever since. Not one of those people is gripping an object. There is nothing in any of their hands. They are gripping a description of themselves, and the description used to be completely accurate, which is exactly what makes it so difficult to see and so painful to be told about. It was true. That is the trouble. It was true for years, and it earned its place, and nobody sends a letter to say when it stopped. Now, this is where the tradition says something quite radical, and I want to put it gently, because said badly it sounds bleak, and it is not bleak at all. It says that the self you are holding on to is not a fixed object that you possess and must defend. It is something that is being made continuously out of what is happening, assembled fresh, more or less, out of a body and a set of circumstances and a great many habits, and reassembled tomorrow out of slightly different material, which sounds entirely abstract until you notice that you have already lived through it several times and did not object once. You are not the person you were at 19, not a modified version of them, not an upgrade, genuinely, materially, not that person. There is very nearly nothing left of them in you at all, apart from a handful of stories that have been retold so many times that they have worn completely smooth and no longer have anything of the original in them. Their opinions have gone. Their fears have gone. Most of their friendships have gone. Nearly every cell has been replaced. And that entire transition happened without you losing anything at all, because you were not clinging to 19 when you were 34. Nobody does. It simply happened gradually, in the background, while you were busy with other things, and at no point did anybody mourn it. It was not a bereavement. There was no day on which you lost that person. There was no funeral for them, and you have never once wanted one. So the suffering does not come from changing. It cannot. You have changed completely, 12 times over, and survived every single one of them without noticing most of them happening. The suffering comes from something much more specific than that. It comes from holding on to a description, while the thing being described is quietly becoming something else underneath it. From the gap, from the friction of a man in a car park who is still, in his hands, the head of a school that has a new one. So the useful question in that car park, and the one worth taking into the rest of tonight, is not who am I now? That question is far too large for 1 o'clock in the morning, and it has never been answered by anybody lying down. It is much smaller than that. What am I still carrying that has already ended? Not to answer it now, not to fix anything tonight, and above all, not to make a single decision about any of it in a dark room at 1 in the morning, which is comfortably the worst place and hour anybody has ever chosen for making one. Nothing decided at this time of night has ever been improved by having been decided at this time of night. Just to notice, without doing anything about it, whether there is something, a version of yourself, a job you no longer have, or a job you still have but left in every sense except the practical one. A way that things were arranged in 2019 and have not been since. A role in a family that everybody else quietly stopped playing about 11 years ago. Some of them are heavy and some of them are not. And some of them are so old that you have entirely stopped experiencing them as anything at all. They have stopped feeling like a position you are holding and started feeling like a fact about the world, which is the point at which they become very difficult to see and very expensive to keep. Let us rest here for a while. You do not have to be anybody in particular in this room tonight. That is worth sitting with for a moment, because it is genuinely unusual and most people go weeks without it. There is nobody here to be competent for. Nobody is relying on you for anything at all between now and the morning. No version of you is required by anybody, and no version is being assessed. Whatever you are good at is not needed at this hour. Whatever you are not good at is not being noticed either. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands lie open on the blanket, holding nothing at all. Let the jaw come apart and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. Whatever you have been all day and all week, and for the last 19 years, you can put down for 6 hours. It will all be there in the morning if you want it. And a good deal of it you will find that you do want, and will pick straight back up over breakfast without thinking about it. And that is entirely fine. None of it has to be decided tonight. Nothing is being given up here. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because there is something a closed hand cannot do, and it is not the thing people expect. And it is the reason all of this matters, rather than being merely elegant. There is a boy of about 7 standing in front of a horse with a mint in his fist, and his grandfather is about to teach him something he will use for the rest of his life. Let us go and stand at that gate. The gate is a metal one, and it is cold to lean on, and it is about halfway up a lane with hedges either side, and the horse is not theirs and never has been. That is the ordinary way that this happens all over the country. There is a horse in a field somewhere near where somebody's grandparents live. It has been there for years. Everybody who walks up that lane knows it, and half of them know its name. And children get brought to see it, generation after generation, and nobody ever asks the owner. The boy is 7. The grandfather is 71, and was a farrier for a few years in his 20s before his back went, and then did several other things and never talked about any of them much. And in the boy's coat pocket there is a packet of mints, which is, as far as he is concerned, the entire point and purpose of the walk, and always has been. The horse comes over. She always comes over. 40 years of children with pockets have taught her exactly what a small person at a gate means. She puts her head over the top bar and does the thing that horses do at close range, which is to be considerably larger than anybody remembers them being from a distance. And the boy takes out a mint, and he holds his arm out over the gate, and he grips it, hard, in a proper fist, knuckles up, thumb clamped down over the top of the fingers, the mint entirely enclosed and completely invisible, and the whole arm out straight and rigid from the shoulder. He is not being silly, and nobody should laugh at him. He's doing precisely what fear does in a human being, which is close the hand. And he's frightened for entirely good reasons, because there is a very large animal with very large teeth, about 18 inches from his face, and he is 7 years old, and it is breathing on him, and the horse, obviously, cannot take it. She tries perfectly willingly. She has done this several thousand times with several hundred children. She puts her nose against his fist. She mouths at it and blows on it and works round the outside of it with her lips looking for an edge to get under. And there is nothing there she can possibly get hold of, because the mint is inside a closed hand, and a horse's mouth, for all its size and all its cleverness about mints, cannot open a human hand and never will. And the boy's arm gets steadily more rigid, because the whiskers are alarming, and the warm breath is alarming, and the sheer size of the head at close range is alarming. So the whole business settles into a stalemate between a frightened child who wants very much to give a horse a mint, and a mildly interested horse who would quite like to have it, and neither of them able to complete a transaction that both of them want. And the grandfather does not tell him to open his hand. That is the part worth noticing, and it is exactly the same principle as the woman kneeling on the bank talking about a duck. He does not say, "Open your hand." He does not say you are doing it wrong. He does not take hold of the fist and try to prise the fingers apart, which is what most adults would do, and which would have produced a screaming child and a bitten hand. He does not pull on the arm at any point. He waits about 10 seconds watching, and then he says, "Here, give it here a minute." He takes the mint out of the fist, which is not as easy as it sounds, and takes a certain amount of persuading, because the fist does not want to give it up either. Then he puts it on his own hand, flat, palm up, fingers straight out and slightly spread, thumb pressed out of the way at the side, and he holds the whole arrangement out under the horse's nose without any ceremony at all. And she takes it, immediately, without a moment's hesitation, with a good deal of lip and no drama of any kind whatsoever, and then goes back to chewing and looking at the middle distance. The entire thing takes about a second and a half. Then he says the thing that the boy remembers 40 years later, which is not a piece of wisdom and is simply a practical instruction from a man who has been round horses. She can't take it out of a fist. She's not built for it. She can only take it off a flat hand. If you close up, she gets nothing and you get bitten, and neither of you wanted that. So the boy tries it, because his grandfather is standing there and there is no getting out of it. And it is horrible. That should be said plainly, because everybody who has ever done it remembers the horrible part, and nobody mentions it afterward. Holding a completely flat, open, defenseless hand out towards something with teeth that size is one of the least natural things a small child is ever asked to do. Every instinct in him says close it. That is what the instinct is for. It has been keeping children's fingers attached to children for a very long time. His hand is shaking, visibly. The mint is rolling about on his palm and nearly goes over the side twice. And his grandfather says nothing at all, which is the second thing he did right. And then there is a nose, and a great deal of warm air going across his palm, and a whiskery, bristly business over his fingers that he says he can still feel 40 years later if he thinks about it, and then lips, which are surprisingly precise and surprisingly gentle, and nothing whatsoever like teeth. And then the mint is simply gone, and his hand is completely intact and slightly wet, and being examined by its owner with a good deal of astonishment. He said the strangest thing about the whole afternoon was that it did not hurt at all, not even slightly, not even a nip, that he had spent the entire preceding 2 minutes braced for it to hurt, with his whole body organized around the expectation and that the hurting simply never arrived and was never going to. He is in his 40s now, and he has children of his own, and he has taken them up a different lane to a different field to see a different horse. And he has said the same sentence to them that was said to him at that gate, more or less word for word. He says it comes out without him choosing it at all, in the voice it was originally said in, which he finds slightly unnerving. And he says the thing he had not expected at all as a father was watching his own daughter go through the identical 2 minutes in front of him. The fist, the straight rigid arm, the horse mouthing patiently at a closed hand and getting absolutely nothing for its trouble, and the entire business solved, in the end, by turning one small hand over and flattening it out. He said he understood, standing at that gate with his own child, that his grandfather had not been teaching him about horses at all on that afternoon in the lane, that the man had almost certainly known exactly what he was teaching, and that he had very sensibly said nothing whatsoever about it, and had talked about the mince instead, and had let it go in the only way that it ever goes in. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets, and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is the thing that boy learned standing at that gate, and it is the piece of tonight that turns the entire argument round and points it the other way. Everything up to this point has been about what gripping costs the person doing it, the sound that will not come out of the bow, the arm that will not come back through the railings, the hawk that goes over the ridge and does not return, the 19 years sitting uselessly in a car at 8:10. All of that is one half of the argument, and it is the half everybody hears. This chapter is the other half of it, and it is the half that people miss entirely, and it is arguably the more important of the two. A closed hand cannot receive. That is not the moral point, and it is not a piece of poetry. It is the same plain physical fact as the mint on the palm at that gate. A fist has exactly one capability. It can retain what is already inside it. That is the whole of its repertoire. And it purchases that single capability by giving up every other thing that a hand can do, which is a great many things, and which is most of the reason anybody has hands at all. It cannot take anything in. Nothing new can arrive in it, however much the hand might want it, and however much of it is being offered from outside. It cannot be held by another hand, not properly, not the way two open hands hold each other. It cannot do any work at all. Nothing can be built or mended or written by a closed hand. And it cannot rest. A fist is a muscular effort, continuously maintained by somebody. A hand that is making one is not resting, and cannot rest, and will not rest until it stops making it. And there is something almost cruel about the arrangement, which is worth naming out loud, because every single person listening has felt it at some point, and very few have ever put the two halves together. The times in your life when you have most needed something to arrive are, almost without exception, the times when you were gripping hardest. The year you most badly needed a friendship is the year you were least able to be easy company, because you needed it too much to be relaxed about any of it. The months when you most needed things to go well at work are the months you were most tense in every meeting, and slightly too eager, and slightly too watchful, and nobody could say why they found you hard going that spring. The evening you most needed a conversation to go a particular way is the evening you could not stop steering it, and the night you most need to sleep is this one. and you are gripping. That is not a punishment. It is not irony, and it is not the universe having a joke at anybody's expense. It is one single mechanism producing both halves of the problem at once. The fear closes the hand. A closed hand cannot receive. And so the very thing you are frightened of not getting is the one thing that cannot reach you while you are frightened of not getting it. And the way out of it is not to want the thing less. That is the instruction everybody reaches for, and it is the wrong one. And it does not work, and it makes people feel guilty about wanting perfectly reasonable things. The boy did not stop wanting to feed that horse. Nobody suggested that he should. He wanted it exactly as much at the end as at the beginning, and rather more, because by then it had become difficult. Nothing about the wanting was touched at any point. He simply changed the shape of his hand, and the mint went, and the whole transaction took about 4 seconds after 2 minutes of stalemate. That is available to you tonight, and it is a very small thing, and it costs nothing at all to try. Not stop wanting to sleep. Nobody can do that, and it would be pulling on the arm again, and it has never worked for anybody in the history of tired people. Just notice, without doing anything about it, whether you happen to be holding it in a fist. Notice whether sleep, tonight, has quietly turned into something to be achieved, something to be gripped and worked at, and checked on at intervals. Whether there has been any arithmetic about hours, whether some part of you has been monitoring how it is going. And if it has, then that is entirely usual, and it does not mean anything about you, and there is nothing whatsoever the matter with you. Everybody within half a mile of you who is awake at this moment is doing precisely the same thing, in the same posture, with the same expression. And then, without doing anything about the wanting, simply let the hand be flat. Let us do that quite literally for a moment, because the body is a good deal more honest than the mind, and the mind follows it rather more often than it would ever admit. Turn one hand palm up on the blanket, if that is comfortable where you are lying, and simply let it be open. Fingers loose and slightly apart, the way they fall when nobody is arranging them. The palm soft. Nothing in it and nothing wanted in it. Do not hold it open. That is a different thing, and it is just as much work. Simply stop closing it. That is a posture your body understands completely and has understood since before you could speak. It does not have to be explained to it, and it does not have to mean anything. It is simply the shape of receiving, rather than the shape of holding on. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. There is nothing at all to be got tonight, nothing to be kept hold of, nothing whatsoever that has to be caught before it goes past you. When you are ready, we will go on together, because there is a version of grip that is stranger than all of these, and almost everybody has one, and most people have never once looked at it directly. There is a woman of 58 with a box on her kitchen table that she has moved house with 4 times and has not opened since 1998. Let us go and watch her open it. The box is a wine box, the sort with the cardboard dividers taken out of it, and it has brown parcel tape across the top that has gone the colour of weak tea and lifted at one corner. There is writing on the side of it, in marker pen, in her own handwriting from 22 years ago, which she recognizes immediately and which looks slightly wrong to her now. And what it says is desk. That is the whole of what it says. 4 letters. Desk. She's 58 and she's having the kitchen done at last after about 9 years of talking about it, which means the cupboard under the stairs has to be emptied because that is where the electrics are, and the man is coming on the Thursday, which is why the box is standing on the kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon in October with a cup of tea beside it and the radio on. It has been sitting in that cupboard at the back behind the Hoover for 11 years. Before that, it was in a loft for 6 years under the water tank with a bin bag over it because of a leak in 2013. Before that, it was in a spare room in a different house for 3 years behind a door that did not open all the way. And before that, it was in the back of a wardrobe in a flat that she has not thought about in a decade and could no longer find on a map. 4 separate house moves, 2 of them with proper firms and printed invoices. That box has been carried up and down stairs by removal men in 3 different counties and by her husband more than once, and on one occasion in 2007 by her brother, who lifted it and asked her what was in it and got told that she was not entirely sure, which was, at the time, completely true. She has not opened that box since the afternoon she taped it shut in 1998 in an office, on the last afternoon of a job that she was made redundant from at the age of 36. And she opens it on the Tuesday afternoon with a bread knife because the tape has gone hard and brittle and will not tear. It comes apart with a noise like something being unstuck rather than cut. And here, in full, is what is in it. A stapler. A genuinely good one, heavy, metal, the sort they do not make anymore, which she was very pleased about, and which is now on the desk in the small bedroom upstairs. 4 company mugs with a logo on them, one of them chipped at the rim. A photograph in a cheap plastic frame of 11 people standing outside a pub in the sun, squinting, of whom she can name 9 straight off and a 10th after about a minute. A wall planner for 1998, still rolled up, entirely unused and unmarked. 3 pens, all completely dried up, one of them quite a good one. A calculator with a dead battery and a solar strip that no longer does anything. A pot of paper clips, still in the pot, still perfectly serviceable. A stack of headed notepaper for a company that ceased to exist in 2003, and whose logo she could still draw from memory. And a birthday card, her 36th, signed by about 20 people, several of whom she has genuinely not thought about once in the intervening years, one of whom she now knows from somebody else entirely, died in 2011, and a small potted cactus, long dead, grey and shrunken in about an inch of what used to be compost, which had come with her from a previous desk in a previous building, and which she distinctly remembers buying in a garden centre on a Sunday. That is the entire contents of it. There is nothing else in that box, and there never was, and there was never going to be. She sat at the kitchen table for a while with all of it out in front of her and the tea going cold. And what she said afterward, when she told the whole thing to a friend some weeks later, was that she had not been upset by a single one of the things in that box. She had looked at the photograph for a while and worked out the 10th name, and that had been rather nice. She had taken the stapler upstairs. What got her was the 22 years that she had paid removal men twice on invoices to carry a dead cactus and 4 mugs and a wall planner for 1998 across 2 counties. that she had made room for it in a wardrobe, and then in a spare room, and then in a loft, and then in a cupboard under the stairs, in a house she had not even seen when the box was taped shut. That her brother had carried it up a flight of stairs for her in 2007 and asked what was in it, and she had said she was not sure, and that was the truth, and that every single time she had come across it, she had thought quite clearly, I must go through that at some point, and had then picked it up and moved it somewhere else and not opened it, not once, in 22 years, never even a corner of the tape. She said, I did not want any of it. I have not wanted a single thing in that box since about 2001, and I probably never wanted the mugs at all. And then, I just never put it down. The friend she told it to said the obvious thing, which is that she should have opened it years ago. And she said no, actually. She said she had thought about that quite a lot since the Tuesday, and she was not sure it was true. She said that if she had opened it in 1999, it would have been a different box entirely. It would have been a box about being pushed out of a job at 36, and she was not in any state to look at that in 1999, and would not have thanked anybody for making her. What she opened on the Tuesday was a box with a stapler in it. She said the 22 years had not been wasted. They had been the thing that turned it into an ordinary box, and she does not think there was a shortcut. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark, and the weight of the blankets, and the breath moving quietly in and out. That is the third thing about grip, and it is the strangest of the three, and it explains a great deal about why people are awake at this hour. Grip outlives wanting. A hand that has closed does not automatically open again. When the reason for closing it has gone, it stays shut, and it stays shut because it was never being held shut by the reason in the first place. It was closed by fear on a particular afternoon, in particular circumstances, and fear does not send anybody a notification when it has finished. There is no letter. Nothing arrives to say, that is over now, you can stop. So the hand simply carries on doing what it was doing, and then that becomes a house move, and then a loft, and then a cupboard under the stairs in a house that did not exist in her life when the tape went on. And then it becomes 22 years without anybody ever having decided anything. And this is the point at which I want to be very careful indeed, because there is a way of telling this story that turns into a criticism of a woman at a kitchen table. She does not deserve one, and neither for whatever you are carrying do you. That box was taped shut on the last afternoon of a job that she was pushed out of at the age of 36 by people who had been perfectly friendly to her the week before. She did it at about 4 o'clock in an office where everybody was being very kind and nobody was looking at anybody, with a roll of parcel tape she had to go and ask for. Of course, it was not opened the following spring. Opening that box in 1999 would have meant sitting down on a floor somewhere with the whole of that afternoon, and the birthday card, and the photograph of 11 people outside a pub who all still had jobs, and she had a mortgage, and 2 children under 6, and about 4 minutes to herself in any given day, and absolutely no time to sit with anything at all. Not opening it was entirely reasonable. It was the correct decision at the time, made by a sensible woman with a great deal on. The grip made complete sense on the day it formed. That is true of very nearly every grip that anybody is carrying, which is precisely why they are so difficult to see, and why it is so unfair to be told off about them by people who are not there. But then the mortgage got paid off, and the children grew up and left, one to Bristol and one considerably further. The company ceased to exist in 2003, and its logo went off the side of a building in a business park. Every single person in that photograph moved on to something else, and several of them left the industry altogether, and one of them died. And the cactus died sometime around the turn of the century in the dark, without anybody noticing. And the hand stayed shut through the whole of it, because nobody had told it anything, and because that is simply what hands do when they are not told. So the useful question is never why are you still holding that, which is not a question at all, but an accusation with a question mark on the end of it. It is a good deal gentler than that, and it is genuinely worth asking, do I still want this, or am I just still holding it? And you will find, if you ask it honestly about one or two specific things rather than about your whole life, that a genuinely surprising number of them fall straight into the second category. Not all, but more than you would expect, and some of them quite large ones. Old grievances that you would genuinely rather not think about, and that you go on thinking about anyway, at intervals, for no benefit to anybody, including yourself. A standard you set for your own work in a job that you left in 2015, which was appropriate to that job and to nothing you have done since. A way of being with your family that made complete sense when you were 24 and living 300 miles away and had something to prove. An argument about a kitchen extension that you won. A view of somebody that you formed in about 4 minutes in 2011 on the strength of one bad afternoon. Not one of those is a thing you want. If somebody offered to take any of them away this evening, you would hand them over without a second's hesitation and feel lighter about it. They are simply things you are holding, which is not remotely the same as wanting them. And the difference between those two is very nearly the whole of tonight. And here is the reason that this chapter is good news rather than bad news, which is worth saying before we go any further. When she opened that box on the Tuesday, nothing happened. There was no reckoning. Nothing came flooding back. She did not have to process anything, or forgive anybody, or come to terms with 1998, or have a conversation with herself about her 30s. She looked at a stapler and 4 mugs and a photograph and a dead cactus in a pot. She took the stapler upstairs and put it on her desk. She kept the photograph, and the whole of the rest of it went out to the bin in about 4 minutes, including the box, and she went back to thinking about the kitchen. That is what is generally in the box in the end. That is what is in most of them. Not always, and I want to be honest about that, rather than tidy. There are boxes that are genuinely heavy. We will come to those later on tonight, and I am not going to stand here and pretend that everything anybody is carrying turns out to be a stapler. But a very great deal of what people carry from house to house for decades turns out, when it is finally opened on a kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday, to be 4 mugs and a dried up biro and a wall planner for 1998. Let us rest here for a while then, holding nothing at all. Nothing has to be opened tonight. Not one thing. Nothing has to be gone through or sorted out or decided about or faced. There is no box on this bed, and there is nothing in this room with tape on it. The cupboard under the stairs will still be there on Saturday and on the Saturday after that, and it is in no hurry whatsoever. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands lie open on the blanket. Let the jaw come apart and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without you arranging it. Whatever you have been carrying from one house to another and up and down other people's stairs, you are not carrying it at this moment. It is on a table somewhere in the dark, taped shut, doing absolutely nothing and doing you no harm at all at this hour of the night. You can pick it up in the morning if you want it. Most people find in the end that they do not. When you are ready, we will go on together, because there is one more cost of gripping, and it is the one that people find hardest to accept, and it is worth an hour of anybody's attention. Gripping does not only cost the person doing it, it damages the thing being gripped. There is a man in a workshop with a torque wrench and 40 years of stripped threads behind him, and he has a very clear view about this. Let us go and see him. The workshop is a unit on a small industrial estate between a tire place and somebody who does signage for vans. There is a calendar on the wall from a bearing supplier, 3 years out of date and never taken down. There is a kettle that everybody complains about and nobody replaces. And there is the particular smell of a place like that, which is oil and hot metal and something underneath it that nobody can name. He's been doing this for 41 years, since he was 16. Engines mostly, gearboxes when he has to, and a very great deal of general putting right of things that other people have already had a go at, which is, he says, most of the work and always has been. And on the bench in front of him this morning there is a cylinder head with a stripped thread in it. It came in at about 8:30, carried in by a man who has already worked out roughly what has happened and is not going to enjoy the next 4 minutes of conversation. The thread is one of the ones in the top, where a bolt goes down into the aluminium. And what has happened is straightforward and extremely common. Somebody has done that bolt up too tight, and the aluminium has given way before the steel bolt did, which is what aluminium always does when the two of them disagree, because it is the softer of the two and always was. So now the hole is round and smooth and shiny inside, and it will not hold anything at all ever again without work. It is fixable. That should be said, because it is not a tragedy and nobody is going to lose an engine over it. There is a steel insert that goes in, and it costs a certain amount of money and the best part of a day, and afterwards it will be perfectly fine and probably stronger than it was. But he has a view about it, and he has had the same view for 4 decades, and he expressed it that morning in the way that men in workshops express things. He said the bolts that fail are almost never the loose ones. That is a genuinely strange thing to hear if you have never thought about it, and most people have not. Everybody assumes that things come apart because they were not done up tight enough. That is the entire folk understanding of the subject, and it is what everybody's father told them. And sometimes it is perfectly true. He is not saying it never happens, and he has seen plenty of things rattle loose over the years, but he says that in 41 years, the overwhelming majority of the ruined threads and snapped studs and cracked castings and mangled fittings that have come across that bench were done by somebody who was frightened of the thing coming loose, not by somebody careless, not by somebody who could not be bothered, by somebody worried, Somebody who gave it another quarter turn at the end, just to be certain. Somebody who did not have a torque wrench, or who had one and set it correctly and heard it click and then gave it a bit more anyway because the click did not feel like enough. Somebody who trusted their own arm over a calibrated tool, which is a thing almost everybody does at least once. He said the phrase that people use is always more or less the same one, and that he could set his watch by it. I just wanted to make sure. And then he explained what is actually going on inside a bolt, which is the whole reason we have come out to a small industrial estate at 1 o'clock in the morning. A bolt does not hold anything together by being crushed down against the surface. That is not the mechanism. It is what everybody assumes the mechanism is, and it is wrong. And almost nobody outside a workshop has ever been told otherwise. A bolt works by being stretched. When you tighten a bolt correctly, the shank of it stretches, genuinely stretches by a few thousandths of an inch, like an extremely stiff spring being pulled. And it is that stretch, that stored tension sitting in the metal, which holds the joint together. It goes on holding it while the engine heats up from cold to 100 degrees and expands, and while it cools down overnight and contracts, and while it vibrates several thousand times a minute for years. The stretch takes up all of that movement. That is its entire job. A correctly tightened bolt is elastic. That is not a weakness in it, and it is not a compromise. It is doing its job precisely by having some give in it. And when you over-tighten it, you take that metal past the point where it can spring back, past the yield point, which is the phrase, and which is a real and measurable place. Beyond there, the bolt stops being elastic. It becomes permanently stretched, deformed, done for. Or it does not give at all, and the softer material around it strips out instead, which is what happened to the aluminium on that bench. Either way, the stored tension is gone, and it does not come back. The joint has not been made more secure by any of that. It has been made considerably less secure. The very thing that was holding it together has been destroyed by the effort to hold it together harder. He said something at the end of all that, wiping his hands on a rag, that he has probably said 1,000 times in that unit and will say 1,000 more. Tight is not the same as secure. It never was. The man came back for the head on the Friday and paid for the insert and was fairly quiet about it. And on the way out, he said the thing that everybody says, which is that he had only been trying to make sure it did not work loose. And the old boy said what he always says, which is that he knows that everybody who has ever stripped a thread was trying to make sure it did not work loose. That he has never once, in 41 years, had somebody bring in a ruined casting and say they had not cared enough. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is the cost that we have not looked at yet, and it is the one people find hardest to accept. Everything so far has been about what gripping costs the person doing the gripping, the exhaustion of it, the sound that will not come, the hand that cannot receive. This one is about what it does to the thing being gripped, because a grip is not a neutral act carried out at a safe distance from its object. It presses on something. There is a force involved, and the force goes somewhere. And the harder it presses, the more it changes the thing it is pressing on. Almost always in the direction of the very thing you were afraid of in the first place, which is the cruel part of the arrangement and the part nobody warns you about. Look at what happens to a relationship that is being gripped, and be gentle with yourself while you look at it, because everybody has done this at some point, usually with somebody they would have died for. A person who is being held too tightly starts, at some point that nobody could date, to manage you. They do not decide to do it. There is no moment. It is not a betrayal, and it is not deceit. And if you accuse them of it, they would be genuinely hurt and genuinely baffled. It simply becomes very slightly easier on a Tuesday to tell you the version of the day that will not produce a reaction. And then it is easier the next time because it worked. And then it is simply how things are done, and nobody has noticed, and it has been going on for 4 years. They soften what they say about work. They leave out the bit that would worry you, which is often the bit they most needed to say out loud. They agree slightly faster than they actually mean it, because agreeing takes 4 seconds and the alternative takes 40 minutes. And none of that is dishonesty. It is somebody being careful with a person they love, which sounds like a good thing, and which is quietly costing you the only thing you wanted. And the genuinely terrible part is what happens next, because it is a loop and it runs on its own. You feel it. Of course you feel it. You have been watching extremely closely, which was the entire problem in the first place, and you are the person in that house best placed to notice a change of half a degree. Something has gone slightly flat, and you cannot name it and cannot point to a single incident. So you grip harder, because that is what fear does when it detects something. You ask another question. You ask whether everything is all right, in a particular tone. You check, and they manage you a very little bit more, because the question had a tone in it. And here is what I want to be very clear about, because this is the point at which people start blaming somebody. Nobody in that arrangement is behaving badly. Both of those people are doing their best. Both of them love each other, actually and properly, and would say so and mean it. Neither of them has done anything that anybody could point at. The mechanism does not care about any of that. It does not require a villain, and it does not need anybody to be in the wrong. It simply grinds on quietly for years, and neither party could tell you when it started or name a single thing that caused it. And in the end, the thread strips, and the person who did it up too tight was, from beginning to end, the one who was most frightened of it ever coming loose. Now, this applies to a great deal more than people, and it is worth naming 2 or 3 others quickly, because the pattern in every one of them is identical. A piece of work held too tightly stops being any good. Everybody who has ever made anything knows this, and nobody can quite explain it. The thing you cannot bear to get wrong is the thing you go over and over until all the life has gone out of it. And the version you knocked out quickly on a Tuesday afternoon, without much caring, is somehow better, and everybody says so, and it is maddening. A conversation held too tightly stops being a conversation at all. It becomes a thing you are steering with a destination in mind, and the other person can feel the steering even if they could not name it. A child held too tightly tells you less. Not at 14 particularly, but at 9 and at 36. Not because they are secretive people, because your reaction has quietly become one of the costs of telling you things, and they are doing the arithmetic without knowing it, in about 1.5 seconds, and a night held too tightly stops being a night at all. It becomes a project, with a target and a deadline at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and a running assessment of how it is going, which is precisely the arrangement you are lying in at this moment. So here is the reframe, and it is the whole of this chapter in 2 words. And notice that it does not ask you to care less about anything at all. Tight is not secure. Elastic is secure. That is the sentence, and it is worth having, and it is true of a great deal more than engines. The bolt holds because it has some give in it. The joint survives the heating and the cooling and the vibration precisely because there is a little stretch in the fastening, and it fails the moment somebody removes that stretch in the name of making it safer. Everything that has to survive over any length of time works like this, without exception. Bridges are built with expansion joints. Trees stand through gales by bending. Rope works because it stretches. Cartilage, tendons, the discs in your back, all of them. Nothing rigid lasts. Rigidity is not what strength looks like. It is what strength looks like about 4 minutes before it fails. Let us rest here for a while, with some give in it. Nothing in your life needs another quarter turn tonight. Not one thing. Not the situation at work, which will be exactly what it is on Monday, regardless of tonight. Not the conversation you have been planning, which will go the way conversations go, and not the way rehearsals do. And not the thing you said in March, which you have now gone over 11 separate times, and which was not improved by a single one of the 11, and will not be improved by a 12th. Whatever is holding in your life is holding. It has been holding all day without your supervision, and it is holding now. It does not need you to lean on it in the dark at 1 in the morning. That is not maintenance. That is another quarter turn. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands lie open on the blanket, holding nothing at all. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. There is nothing at all in this room that has to be made sure of tonight. When you are ready, we will go on together, quietly, for the long rest of the night, because there is one thing that demonstrates the whole of this in about 4 seconds, and it is not a metaphor, and it is not a story about somebody else, and every person listening either can do it already or found it impossible. There is a woman of 51 at a swimming pool on a Tuesday evening, learning to float, and she cannot do it. And the reason she cannot do it is the reason for everything else tonight. Let us go and stand at the side of that pool. The pool is a small municipal one, built in about 1974, with a shallow end and a hoist by the steps, and a viewing window along one side that has gone slightly cloudy with age. It is a Tuesday evening in November, 8:20, and there are 4 adults in the shallow end. That is the beginner's class. It runs for 40 minutes and it never fills up. They range in age from 26 to 68, and none of them looks at any of the others. And all of them are extremely polite in the changing rooms. She is 51 years old. She never learned to swim. There was an incident at a school swimming lesson when she was 8, involving a whistle and a teacher who has almost certainly been dead for 20 years, and which she can still describe in more detail than she would like. And after that, there was always a reason not to. For 43 years, perfectly good reasons, every one of them, one after another, and none of them the actual reason. Her daughter is having a baby in the spring, and there is a house with a pool in it that the family go to sometimes in August, which somebody's in-laws own. and she has decided, at 51, that she does not want to be the one sitting on the side of it with a book and a cardigan for the rest of her life while everybody else is in the water. That is the whole of the reason, and she is slightly embarrassed by it. So she is here, in the shallow end, on a Tuesday evening in November at 8:10, in a swimming costume she bought specially and does not much like, and the one thing she cannot do at all, in any circumstances, is float. She can walk about in the shallow end quite happily. She can put her face in the water, which took 3 weeks and a good deal of talking. And she can hold the rail with both hands and kick, properly, with her legs doing the right thing. And she's very quietly pleased about that and has mentioned it to 2 people. But when the instructor asks her to simply lie back on the water and let it take her, nothing works at all. Nothing whatsoever. She goes down. Every single time. Not dangerously. She's in 4 feet of water with an instructor standing 18 inches away and a rail within reach. But she goes down immediately and completely, feet first, like somebody stepping unexpectedly into a hole, and comes up spluttering and apologizing, which she does every time, and which he has told her not to. And she has now failed at it 11 separate times across 2 weeks. She is starting to think quite seriously that she is simply one of those people who does not float, that there is something about her build or her bones or her particular arrangement. She has said this out loud twice to the instructor, and she is not entirely joking about it either time. The instructor is about 30 and has taught a very great many frightened adults in that same shallow end, and is not remotely surprised by any of it. And on the 11th failure, standing beside her in 4 feet of water, he says, "You are holding your breath, and you are pushing down with your hands, every single time, the moment your ears go under," which she has not noticed at any point across 11 attempts and 2 weeks, and which is completely and immediately true the moment he says it. She is doing 2 separate things, neither of which she has any idea she is doing. The first is that she takes an enormous breath at the last moment and locks it in her chest. She believes, somewhere, that a big lungful of air will make her float. What it actually does is make her rigid from the collarbone down, and rigid things do not lie on water. The second is her hands. As soon as her ears go under, both hands press down hard on the water beside her, trying to hold her up, which pushes her body down every time. That is simply what pressing down on water does to the thing attached to the hands. Both of those are efforts to stay up. That is what they are for. That is the whole intention behind them. And both of them are precisely what is sinking her. And then he says the thing that this entire chapter exists in order to arrive at. You cannot make the water hold you. That is not a thing anybody can do. It will do it or it will not, and it will, because that is what water does with people. But it can only do it if you stop trying to help. And on the Tuesday after that, on about the 15th attempt, on an evening when nothing else was going particularly well, it simply happens. She said afterward that she has genuinely no idea what she did differently on that 15th attempt, and that this is the frustrating part whenever anybody asks her about it. She thinks she was very tired. It had been a long day, and she had nearly not come. And she thinks she had somewhere in the previous 10 minutes quietly stopped expecting it to work at all, which took the effort straight out of it without her having decided anything or noticed anything. She lay back. Her ears went under, and the sound of the pool went away and was replaced by the other sound, the muffled underneath one, which is the part everybody finds strange the first time. And her hands did nothing whatsoever, not because she was controlling them, because she had given up on them somewhere around attempt 11, and they were simply lying there beside her doing nothing, and the water held her. She said it was the single strangest sensation of her entire adult life, and she has thought about how to describe it and cannot, that she was doing nothing whatsoever, not one thing, no effort anywhere in her body at all, and that she was not sinking, and that those two facts absolutely refused to sit together in her head and kept coming apart and had to be believed one at a time. She lay there for something like 40 seconds, on her back, with her ears under, looking straight up at the ceiling of a municipal swimming pool on a Tuesday evening in November. She said she can still see the ceiling, panels, and a light with something in it, and a patch of damp in the corner. And then, inevitably, she started laughing, which sank her immediately. She can swim now, badly and slowly, and only breaststroke, and she has no interest whatsoever in getting better at it. But she went in the pool in the spring with the baby, and that was the entire point of the exercise, and nobody watching would have known there was anything to it. And she says the floating is still the strange part, that the swimming is just work, and she can feel herself doing it, and it is nothing special, but that lying back and being held by nothing, with her ears under and the ceiling above her, and no effort anywhere in her body at all, is a thing she still cannot quite believe on any given evening, and has to discover again each time. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the pillow and the dark and the weight of the blanket, and your own breathing going quietly on without you. That is where we are going to spend the long part of tonight, and there is nothing at all to understand in any of what follows, because you are doing exactly the same thing at this moment, in a bed, in the dark. Some part of you is holding on to being awake, not deliberately, not because you want to be, and not because of any failure of yours, and certainly not because you have not been trying. In exactly the same invisible way that a woman's hands were pressing down hard on the water at a municipal swimming pool, while she was entirely certain, and would have sworn to anybody, that she was doing her level best to float. She was doing her best. That was the problem. There is an effort running somewhere in you. There has been all evening, and you did not start it, and cannot point to it. And sleep is not a thing that you can do. That is the whole difficulty, and it is worth saying slowly. It is not an action. It is not a task. Nobody in the entire history of the world has ever performed the act of falling asleep, and nobody has ever caught themselves doing it. It is something that arrives on its own when a person stops holding themselves up. And the holding is so quiet and so habitual and so completely invisible to the person doing it that almost nobody ever catches it happening, exactly like a pair of hands pressing down on water. So we are not going to try to sleep, not once, at any point, for the rest of the night. We are simply going to go round the body slowly and find the places that are still holding on, one at a time, without hurrying, in no particular order of importance, and let each of them stop in its own time, without being told to. Let the whole weight of you be given over to the bed. Feel where you are held most. The back of the head, the shoulder blades, the hip and the shoulder if you are lying on your side, the backs of the heels, and let each one of those places hand over a little more than it was giving a moment ago. And then, after a breath or two, a little more than that, and let the attention move down through you slowly, without hurrying anything at all. Start at the top and let it come down through you at whatever speed it goes, without checking on the progress. The scalp, loose, the whole of it, right down to where it meets the neck at the back, the forehead wide and cool, the space between the eyebrows going smooth, the eyelids heavy, the small muscles all around the eyes, which have been working since you woke up this morning and have not been off duty once, letting go now. Behind the eyes, where there is very often a quiet effort going on that nobody has ever mentioned to anybody, a sort of peering held all day. Let that rest back into the head, the cheeks soft, the jaw. Let the teeth come apart very slightly so that they are not touching at all. Let the tongue rest low and wide in the mouth, the throat open and easy, the back of the neck long and unhurried, the shoulders coming down and back into the bed, and then further than that, and then further than you would think was possible because they have been up for years, the upper arms heavy, the elbows, the forearms, and now the hands, both of them, the palms, the backs of them, and each of the fingers, one at a time if you like, all the way out to the tips, holding nothing at all, pressing down on nothing at all. There is no water under those hands tonight, nothing that needs holding up, and nothing whatsoever for them to do between now and the morning. The chest rising and falling on its own, without instruction and without permission. The ribs moving a little at the sides and at the back where nobody ever notices them. The belly soft. That is the one that matters most of all, and the one everybody forgets. Let the breath come down into it, and let it lift and settle on its own, without any help from you whatsoever. The lower back spreading and widening out into the mattress underneath it, the hips giving their whole weight downward, the thighs heavy all the way round, the knees unlocked and doing nothing, the calves releasing, the shins, the ankles, both of them, doing nothing at all now, the tops of the feet, and the soles of the feet, which carried you through the whole of today, every step of it, and which have not been thought about once since you took your shoes off this evening. And let the whole front of the body be soft, the throat, the chest, the belly, the tops of the thighs. That is where people hold themselves ready without ever deciding to, and every bit of it can be put down now. Let the whole back of the body be heavy, the entire length of it, from the base of the skull down to the heels, pressing gently into whatever is underneath it and going nowhere at all. And now the whole of you at once, warm, still, horizontal, in a dark room, in the middle of an ordinary night, held completely and by something that is not you. The bed has been doing this since the moment you laid down on it. Every ounce of you, without being asked, without any effort on its part, and without one single moment of assistance from you at any point in the entire evening. It does not need your help. It has never once needed your help on any night of your life, and it will not need it tonight. Let the breath come and go without any management at all. It has been running all evening without your supervision, and it has done perfectly well. A little longer on the way out, if that happens by itself. And if it does not happen, leave it entirely alone, because arranging the breath is one more pair of hands pressing down on water. You do not have to make anything hold you. It will do it or it will not. And it will. Let us rest here for a long while, with nothing being held up by anybody. When you are ready, we will go on together, quietly, for the end of the night. Because there is one more thing to say, and it is the honest one, and it has to be said before morning rather than discovered afterward. Not everything you are holding is a grip, and there are some things that nobody should ever be told to put down. There is a woman in a kitchen 11 weeks after her husband's funeral, being told by somebody who loves her that it is time to move on. Let us go and stand in that kitchen. The kitchen is the one they put in about 9 years ago and were pleased with, and which is beginning to look like a kitchen from 9 years ago. There is a chair by the back door that nobody sits in, and on the table there is a pile of post that has been there for a fortnight, most of it unopened, some of it addressed to him. It is 11 weeks and 2 days since the funeral. She is 63. They were married for 39 years. People keep saying that number to her, gently, as though it were an achievement she had recently completed and could be congratulated on, rather than being the entire shape of her adult life and everything in it. And her sister-in-law is here, in the chair on the other side of the table, as she has been every single week without fail since it happened. She has been extraordinary. There is no other word for it, and nobody in that family would use a different one. She brought 2 casseroles in the first week, and has kept coming long after the casserole stopped. She dealt with the insurance people on the telephone for 2 hours, and she sat in this kitchen through the worst afternoon of the entire business, in January, and said almost nothing, and did it perfectly. Nobody in this story has behaved better than this woman. That has to be established firmly before anything else, and it has to stay established all the way through. And she says, over the second cup of tea, in complete and total kindness, "You know he wouldn't want you sitting here like this. At some point, you're going to have to let him go." And something in that room changes. Not visibly. Nothing is said about it at all. They carry on. They talk about something else within about 40 seconds, probably the weather or somebody's operation. The sister-in-law goes home at 4, as she always does, and washes up her cup first, as she always does. And she has absolutely no idea, then or ever, that anything happened in that room. But something has closed, quite firmly, and it will not open again. Because up until that sentence, this was the one person in the world she could be honest with. Not her children, who were carrying their own version of it, and who she was protecting. Not her friends, who were kind and slightly frightened. This one, in this kitchen, every week. She said afterward, a long time afterward, that it was not really the words themselves. It was that she understood, somewhere in the middle of the sentence, that there was now a schedule, that somewhere out there a clock had been started by somebody without any announcement, and that 11 weeks was apparently getting on towards the point at which a reasonable woman would be doing rather better than this. She had not known there was a clock. She had not thought to ask what the time was. And so, from that afternoon onward, without deciding anything at all, she began managing her, exactly the way the man in the workshop would have predicted, and for exactly the same reason. Not badly, and not coldly. She was still genuinely glad to see her every week, and would have been upset if she had stopped coming. But she found herself saying that she was doing all right, on afternoons when she was not doing all right at all. she found herself mentioning the garden because the garden was safe and took 4 minutes. And on that first afternoon, she did not say the thing about the shed that she had been intending to say all morning and had been rather looking forward to saying and had needed to say to somebody. She stopped telling her the true version, and she never started again, not in 11 years. The sister-in-law is still coming. They are still close, and they are fond of each other, and neither of them would say there was anything wrong between them. And there is a whole floor of that relationship that closed on a Tuesday afternoon over a cup of tea, permanently, because somebody who loved her very much wanted her to feel better. There is a second half to this, and it happened about 4 months later. She went to see somebody in the March, a counsellor at the hospice, which they offer to families for a year afterward at no cost, and which she very nearly did not use at all, because she had a firm idea that it was for people who were not coping. She rang 3 times and put the phone down twice, and she said, about 4 minutes into the first session, with a certain amount of defiance in it, that she supposed she was going to be told that it was time to move on. She said she had rather come loaded for that, and the woman said, "Why would I tell you that?" And then she said the thing that this whole chapter exists for. She said, "You are not holding on to him. He is not something you have got hold of. You loved somebody for 39 years and he died, and the love did not stop when he did, because that is not how any of it works. What you are describing is not a grip. It is just love with nowhere to put itself." She said that one sentence did more for her than everything else put together, and that she has repeated it to 2 other people since. Both of them widows, both of them in kitchens. She did not stop grieving. That is not what happened, and she is quite firm about it. What happened was that she stopped being ashamed of it. She stopped checking herself against a schedule that somebody had accidentally started for her over a cup of tea in the November. And she said the odd result was that she got better anyway. Not faster, and not on anybody's timetable, but genuinely better over about 4 years, in a way that she does not think would have happened if she had spent those 4 years trying to put something down that was never in her hands. Come back now gently to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blankets and the breath moving quietly in and out. Here is the honest chapter, and it needs saying properly before this night ends. Not everything that you are holding tonight is a grip. We have spent 7 chapters on the fist and on the cost of the fist, and every word of it stands. But a teaching like this one becomes actively dangerous if it is applied to everything, and it gets applied to everything constantly, usually by people who are uncomfortable and want you to stop making them uncomfortable. So let us be clear about the difference, because there is one, and it is not subtle once you know where to look. A grip is maintained by fear. Grief is maintained by love. They feel entirely different from the inside, and anybody who is in one of them already knows perfectly well which one they are in, even if they have never had the words for it. A grip is effortful. That is the first and clearest thing about it. It is a closing. It costs you something continuously, all day, in the background. There is a tightness in it somewhere in the body, usually in the jaw or the belly or the hands. And underneath it, always, some part of you is braced against a thing that you do not want to happen, and that has not happened yet. Grief is not effortful in that way at all. It is exhausting, which is a different thing entirely. It is not a holding on. There is no closing anywhere in it, and no bracing, and nothing is being kept out. It is simply the shape that love takes when the person it was for is not there anymore. It does not require any attention from you at all. It goes on whether you attend to it or not, and you could not put it down if you spent a year trying. And here is the plainest test I know. You can stop gripping. That is the entire premise of tonight and every story in it. The hand can open. Things get better when it does. The bow sits in the fingers and the sound comes out of the violin, and the arm slides back through the railings and the mint goes. You cannot stop grieving. There is no hand to open. There is nothing there to release because you are not holding anything, and there is no fist anywhere in it. Being told to let go of grief is like being told to unclench a colour. There is nothing the instruction could even be addressed to, and the fact that people say it to you anyway and that you cannot do it is not evidence about you. So if somebody has said, let it go to you about something that is genuinely a loss, and you found yourself feeling ashamed and also obscurely furious, then your instinct was correct. They were describing a fist that does not exist. Now, a word about why people say it, because they are almost never being cruel and it helps to know. Let it go is very often a sentence that people say in order to make themselves more comfortable, and they have no idea that this is what they are doing. Grief in a room is genuinely hard to sit with. It is unfixable. It has no useful length and no visible progress and nothing that anybody can do about it. And after about 8 weeks, the people around you begin to run out of the ability to simply be near it without offering something. That is not a moral failing in them. It is what happens to ordinary people who love somebody and cannot help. So they offer a solution instead, not because they want you to suffer, and not because they are impatient with you, because the solution is a thing that can be handed across a table. It is something to do with the hands. And sitting in a kitchen for the 14th week with absolutely nothing to hand over is one of the harder things anybody is ever asked to do, and very few people manage it, and the ones who do are worth a great deal. That woman with the casseroles was not being unkind. She was being loving and slightly out of her depth, and she said a sentence she had heard other people say, and it cost that friendship a flaw. And there is one more thing, which is the important one for tonight, and it applies far beyond bereavement. Some things are supposed to be carried, and carrying them is not a failure of technique or of practice or of character. The love you still have for somebody who has died, which is not a problem and never was, a responsibility you have taken on that is genuinely and properly yours, and that somebody is relying on, and that it would be a great deal easier not to have. A memory of something you did badly, which you have apologized for, and made right as far as it can be made right, and which you will nonetheless think about occasionally at 4 a.m. for the rest of your life. That one is simply the price of being somebody who minds, and the ordinary weight of caring about a handful of people whose lives you cannot control, which everybody who loves anybody is carrying all the time, and which does not go away and should not. None of those is a grip, not one. Nobody should be unclenching any of them. Nobody should be offering you a technique for them. And above all, nobody should be timing you on them at 11 weeks or 11 years. The tradition is very often misread on exactly this point, and the misreading has done real damage. So let me be as plain about it as I can. What it points at is the grasping, the demand that things be otherwise than they are, the refusal of what has actually happened. It has never once said anywhere that you should not love people who have died. It has never said that attachment to the dead is a fault to be corrected, or that a person who still weeps after 2 years is doing it wrong. The idea that it might have said that is a misreading, mostly a Western one, mostly quite recent, and it has caused genuine harm to people who are already having a considerably worse year than the person quoting it at them. So, here is what this means for tonight, and it is very simple and requires nothing. If you are carrying something heavy at this hour, and a good many people listening to this are, you do not have to work out which of the two sorts it is. That is not a job for one in the morning. It is not a job for tonight at all. Whether it turns out to be a fist, or a love with nowhere to put itself, the instruction for the next few hours is exactly and identically the same. You can rest while holding it. That is allowed. It has always been allowed. The bed will take the weight of you and the weight of whatever you have brought to bed with you, in exactly the same way, without distinguishing between them. It does not ask what is in your hands. It has never asked anybody, and it does not require them to be empty before it will hold you. Let us rest here for a while, exactly as we are. Let the shoulders come down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands lie wherever they are, open or not, holding whatever they are holding. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Let the breath come in and go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without you arranging it. Nobody is timing you. There is no schedule anywhere in this room, and there never was one. When you are ready, we will go on together, one last time, for the end of the night, because we began in a small room above a shop, with a woman of 43, and a bow, and a sound that would not come. And there is a coda to that, about 2 years later, in the same room. Let us go back up those stairs. The room above the shop has not changed at all in 2 years, because rooms like that never do. Same music stand with the chip out of the bass. Same radiator that comes on at 6 and makes a noise at about 10 past. Same view over the car park behind the shop. And the same smell, which is rosin and dust, and the particular smell that old buildings above businesses have, and that nobody has ever managed to describe. She is 45 now. She's been coming up those stairs for 2 years and a couple of months, every Tuesday, with a gap of 6 weeks in the middle of it when her mother was ill and then died, and the teacher kept the slot open and did not charge her for it. She is not good. That has to be said plainly, because there is a version of this ending in which she turns out to be secretly gifted, and it would be untrue, and it would spoil the whole thing. She is a competent adult beginner. She practices about 4 times a week, when work allows. She can play a small number of pieces reasonably well, and a rather larger number badly, and she will never play in front of anybody who is not in that room. And what she is playing on this particular Tuesday evening in the autumn is a slow thing in 3 flats that she has been working at for the best part of a month and has begun to be slightly sick of. And in the 4th bar there is a long note. Nothing clever, no shifting, no crossing, nothing that would trouble a competent 12-year-old. Just a long, slow, open note, drawn out over the whole length of the bow from the heel to the tip, which is, as every string player will tell you, the hardest thing there is. And she plays it, and there is a silence afterwards that goes on slightly longer than it should, and she looks up from the music, and her teacher, who is sitting in the chair by the window where she always sits, is looking straight at her. Neither of them says a single word about it, not then and not afterward, partly because there is nothing that could usefully be said, and partly because saying it would have made it into a thing, and partly because they are both English and it was a Tuesday. But both of them know exactly what has just happened in that room. The note that came out of that instrument was not a beginner's note. It was warm all the way through, and even from one end of the bow to the other, and it did not wobble anywhere, and it did not thin out at the tip the way they always do. It simply went on steadily until she wanted it to stop, and it was the sound, the actual sound, the one she had been carrying about in her head since she was 9 years old, in a house with no violin in it and no money for one, and had never expected to make herself, and her hand was doing nothing at all. That is the thing she noticed afterward, driving home, sitting at the lights on the ring road with the case on the back seat. Her hand had been completely soft, entirely. There had been no effort in it anywhere. She had not been holding that bow at all. It had been sitting in her fingers, being carried along, doing its own work, which is precisely what she was told in the first 10 minutes of the first lesson, 2 years and 2 months earlier, by a woman who peeled her fingers off it one at a time and said that it has to sit in your hand and not be held by it. She had understood the words at the time. She had written them down, and it had taken 2 years for her hand to find out what they meant. She says she cannot make it happen. That is the honest report, and she is quite insistent on it. It is not a thing she can produce on purpose, even now, even 3 years in. She has tried, on evenings when she wanted it, and trying is the one reliable way of guaranteeing it will not arrive. What she can do is notice the grip. That is the whole of the skill she has acquired in 3 years, and it is worth rather more than it sounds. She catches it 3 or 4 times in a practice session, almost always in the bar she cares most about, which is the pattern, and which she now finds funny rather than annoying. And when she catches it, she stops. She takes her hand off the bow entirely and shakes it out for a second or two and puts it back and starts the phrase again. That is all. There is no more technique than that. And every so often, without any warning and without her arranging it, the hand is empty and the note comes. There is one more small thing about that Tuesday, and then we will stop. At the end of the lesson, packing up, the teacher said something completely ordinary. She said, "That was nice, the long one in the 4th bar." And that was all. No lesson attached to it. No observation about hands. And driving home, the woman worked out why that had landed the way it did, which was that in 2 years and a bit, she had never once been told that anything she played was nice. Not because the teacher is unkind, because it had not been true before, and the woman would have known, and both of them would have felt it. Come back now, one last time, to your own room, to the pillow, and the dark, and the weight of the blanket, and your own breathing going quietly on without you. Here is where we finish. It is the same thing we started with 3 hours ago in that same room, and it is the only sentence out of the whole night that is worth taking down into sleep with you. You keep best what you hold most lightly. That is not a piece of poetry, and it is not a consolation. It is a description of how holding actually works, and every story tonight has been the same fact from a different angle. The bow that will only sing in an open hand, and that produced nothing but scraping in a closed one. The fist stuck in the park railings, holding nothing at all, and impossible to pull free from the wrong end. The hawk who comes back to the glove for 7 years running, precisely because the leash is in a pocket and she is free to go over the ridge at any moment. The mint that a horse cannot take out of a fist, however much both of them want the transaction, and that goes in a second and a half off a flat palm. The bolt that holds a joint together for years by being allowed to stretch a few thousandths of an inch, and that fails the moment somebody takes that giveaway in the name of making it safer. And a body that floats on 4 feet of municipal water the moment it stops trying to float, and not 1 second before. Notice that not one of those asked anybody to care less about anything at all. Not one of them. That was never the instruction, and it was never on offer. The woman with the violin wanted that sound more than anything she had done in 30 years. The falconer has organized a considerable part of his life around one bird, and the boy at the gate would have stood there all afternoon if that was what it took to give a horse a mint. The wanting was never the problem. The grip was the problem. Only ever the grip. And the grip was never the same thing as the love, however much it has felt like the same thing, and however convincingly it has argued that it was, and however many years it has been quietly standing in for it. They came apart in a room above a shop in about 4 seconds. The first time somebody peeled the fingers off one at a time, and the sound that came out afterward was the proof. So let us finish in the one place where anything can actually be done tonight. Not with your life, which is not available at this hour and does not want to be worked on at 1 in the morning. Not with the people in it who are asleep, with a hand on a blanket in a dark room. Let the breath come in and let it go out, and let the out-breath be the longer of the two without your arranging it. Let the shoulders come down one last time. Let the arms be heavy all the way from the shoulder to the wrist, and let the hands lie open. Palms soft and warm, fingers long and slightly apart, in the way they fall when nobody at all is arranging them, holding absolutely nothing, pressing on nothing, not held open either, because that is work as well. Simply left alone. Let the jaw come apart, and the tongue rest low in the mouth, and the eyelids be heavy, and the space between the eyebrows go smooth and wide. Feel the warmth under the blanket, and the cooler air on your face, and let both be true at once, and let the whole weight of you be handed over to the bed, which has been holding all of it since you lay down, without being asked, and without any assistance from you at any point this evening. We have kept a good deal of company tonight. There was a woman of 43 in a small room above a shop, with 34 years of wanting in her hand and a bow strangled in her fist, and a teacher who took that hand and peeled the fingers off it one at a time. There was a child of 4 with her arm through a set of park railings, and 9 or 10 adults all pulling on the wrong end of the problem, and one stranger who knelt down on the far side of the fence and talked to her about a duck and a bridge. There was a hawk called Bramble, sitting on a fist on a hillside in Northumberland in February, with the jesses hanging loose and the leash in somebody's pocket and 40 minutes of light left. There was a man of 64 sitting in a car in a school car park at 12 minutes past 8 in the morning, in the second space along, on the 11th morning. watching a leak in the guttering that was no longer any business of his. There was a boy of 7 at a cold metal gate, and a mint on a flat open palm, and a great deal of warm air, and a hand that turned out afterward to be entirely undamaged and slightly wet. There was a wine box with 4 letters on the side of it in marker pen, containing a good stapler and 4 mugs and a dead cactus, which crossed 2 counties 4 times over 22 years, and was opened at last on a Tuesday afternoon with a bread knife. There was a stripped thread in an aluminium cylinder head on a bench in a unit between a tire place and a signwriter, put there by somebody who just wanted to make sure it did not come loose. There was a woman of 51 lying on her back in 4 feet of water in a municipal swimming pool in November, doing absolutely nothing whatsoever, entirely astonished, looking at a damp patch on the ceiling. And there was a kitchen 11 weeks and 2 days after a funeral, and a sentence said in complete kindness that closed a door, and a counsellor 4 months later who said, "That is not a grip, that is love with nowhere to put itself. You do not need to remember any of them. Nobody is going to ask you in the morning, and none of it works better for having been remembered, and a story you slept through has done its job rather better than one you stayed awake for. If one thing stayed, the flat palm at the gate, tight is not secure. The hand that opened when nobody pulled on it, you cannot make the water hold you. Then let that be enough. One is plenty. One is a good deal more than most nights leave behind. And if nothing at all stayed, that is enough as well. There was never anything here to learn, and no state you were supposed to arrive at by the end of it. It was a long, slow night with a voice in it, describing something that your hands have known perfectly well since you were about 4 years old. So let the whole of it go now, all at once. The stories, the teachings, the words, the whole 3 hours of it, and this voice as well. And let whatever you are holding go too, or do not. It genuinely does not matter tonight, and nothing in the last 3 hours has ever depended on you managing it, and there is no examination in the morning. Nobody is going to check your hands. Just stop closing. That is all that was ever being asked in any of it. Not open, not release, not let go, which nobody has ever managed by deciding to. Simply stop closing and let the rest happen on its own, the way it did at a set of railings and in 4 feet of water and in a small room above a shop. May your hands be soft tonight. May whatever you love be held lightly enough to stay and long enough to matter. May you be spared the work of making anything hold you. And may you rest now, open and unburdened and entirely as you are, in a night that is asking absolutely nothing of you and never was. Thank you for spending these quiet hours here, whatever it was that brought you to them. It has been good to sit with you in the dark, and there is nothing at all left to do, and no need to remember a word of it. Open your hands. There was never anything in them. Let the breath come, and let it go, and let it come again on its own, and let the night take you the rest of the way. Sleep well, and good night.